esse pessoal diz que eu tô errado e você tem que ficar em casa.
The Hong Kong government has become a puppet of the Chinese government.
Le régime en Algérie ne tolère plus un exercice libre et indépendant de la presse.
I appeal to you, the journalists in this room, to protect your rights.
पीरियड में फॉरेन डील हो और वो दूसरे लॉन्ग टर्म
Не может быть больше 80% фальсификаций!
You've run Reporters Without Borders for European Union and the Balkans, and you actually serve a very, very noble task to actually save freedom of speech in places and countries where societies, politicians and people could not manage. Well, politicians usually do not care about freedom of speech. They notice it when they get into the never invite him list. Usually I noticed in my 20 years experience that we should not rely on governments to save freedom of speech, right? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Iskra, for your kind words and for your interest in the work of RSF.
Actually, we do rely on you a lot here in those post-communist countries where actually we do have a lot of heritage to overcome because, you know, the freedom of speech was the last thing that we could be proud of during communism. Well, I wanted to present you, but maybe the best way to do that is you to present yourself.
So I'm the head of the EU-Balkans desk at Reporters Without Borders in the Paris headquarters. I previously worked as their correspondent for Slovakia, and this was at the time when I was a journalist in Slovakia for the media network Euroactive. And I have also other professional experience. I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Slovakia, and even before that I worked in a major print newspaper in Slovakia. But my vision is European, and when I think about Bulgaria, Slovakia or other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, I consider them a very important part of Europe. I think they can contribute to the European project, and I think it is all the more important that people who have interesting ideas, original ideas, have a strong voice in these countries. They have something to say, and they cannot say these things, they cannot contribute to the development of their societies and of the European Union without press freedom.
Exactly. And I'll present myself. I'm Iskra Angelova. I'm one of those journalists in Bulgaria who got somehow in the forbidden journalists list. And things are so twisted here that I cannot even describe this because I'm not a political or investigative journalist. I'm a cultural talk show producer, writer, and host for 20 years. Have been working for all 3 national TV channels in Bulgaria. The last 14 years I spent working for Bulgarian national public television. And then I was just erased.
За мен е чест да го поканя тук тази вечер големият режисьор Вим Вендерс. Добър вечер.
Добър вечер.
I'm not saying this in order for people to be sorry for me, although I had a big health incident after that, almost lost my life, but because there are no legal charges and no defense for people like me in our countries. This becomes very personal story and everybody says, well, and you become a very personal failure. It just happened to you. It happens all the time. Well, it should be one of those stories of personal failure if I was alone, but more than 20 journalists, very publicly well known, were erased and were fired and were not let to continue working. And this reminds me very much of communism, when my grandfather and our grandfathers and grandmothers were forbidden working. Especially if they were intellectuals, doctors, lawyers, professors. So it's a very scary place to be, but we should continue do our work. And that's where comes alternative media. And we do try all the time to do our job. And here Matthew will say later, he's an American investigative journalist, that alternative, independent media gives you all the tools to actually say the truth. And we are a very free country because journalists are still not killed and don't get into jail. What would you respond to this? You know very well the situation in Bulgaria and on the Balkans. Of course, we cannot compare to Turkey or to Afghanistan if we go out of Europe. Of course, they fight for their lives, but still.
Well, I totally feel with you, and I have admiration for all courageous journalists in Bulgaria. I know many of them had to quit their jobs or were fired because of them just wanting to do professionally their job, and this is something we have been criticizing. But I don't think that the times in Bulgaria are like under communism. You know, under communism, really people were disappearing and they were imprisoned, and there was no political change possible. Yet in today's Bulgaria, I think, we can see that political change is possible. The former government, for example, is out of power. It will be very hard for it to come back to it. And I think there are solutions both on national and European level, because Bulgaria is a important member of the EU. And if you look at the issues of press freedom in Bulgaria, I agree indeed that unfortunately your country accumulates all press freedom problems that we see elsewhere in the EU. And this is the reason why Bulgaria is ranked last in the EU in our World Press Freedom Index on the 112th place. So this is a very sad picture. I believe Bulgarian journalism is in a crisis, and in Bulgaria, in the next few days, I want to call for an exit strategy of this crisis.
Okay. How do you describe lack of freedom of speech in general? Your organization. What are your tools to measure that? Is this just because here, people are they don't believe anymore in media? This is one very big signal. So in this post-COVID or COVID crisis, this even costs lives. It's very dangerous when actually we do not have credible media and nobody gets vaccinated, for example. We're the last in terms of vaccination and the first in terms of mortality after COVID in Europe, not only in European Union. And this is also, so now the lack of freedom of speech, which leads to the lack of credibility of the media, now leads to literal deaths. So the question becomes not that abstract, I think. It's a question of life, of saving lives. So how do you measure this freedom of speech, so to speak? Because I have many friends who say everybody could talk freely what they want. Where do you see this stagnation or this regime you're talking about, or this? You have the freedom you want. There is social media, there is internet. Talk.
Yeah. Yes, I understand. Our focus, however, is not on the whole area of freedom of speech. Our mandate is clear. We focus on defending media freedom. So one part of freedom of speech, we measure it through our World Press Freedom Index. It has 7 indicators. If you're interested, I can go into the details.
Yes.
Yes.
So it brings more concrete measurements of our otherwise abstract talk.
Yes. So there are 2 methods we use. We use the qualitative and the quantitative method.
Okay.
The qualitative method measures 6 indicators through responses to very complex questionnaires by journalists and media experts in the given country. These 6 indicators are media pluralism, independence, self-censorship.
The worst enemy, self-censorship.
Yes, exactly. Very hard to measure, but we're trying. Transparency, this is the 4th. A legislative framework, and 6th, infrastructure, meaning the technical infrastructure like access to internet, etc. In a country which, for example, is a big problem in a country mentioned, Afghanistan now. And then there is the quantitative method, where we count abuses and violence against journalists in all countries.
Okay.
And
sometimes these abuses are invisible. Sometimes journalists are threatened. Sometimes somebody, their boss just yells at them all the time. It's not necessarily, it should be a physical threat.
Yes, you are right. We try to be rigorous, and we focus a lot on physical violence, and then arbitrary arrests and detentions. These are the most important because they are the easiest, so to say, to determine and to compare across countries. But of course, we also map other types like verbal attacks, which you mentioned, or threats, etc. So, but to go back to your question about the quality and the trust in the media, I think this is
professionalism, because if you don't have independent professional media, free professional media, people go to Facebook and read their conspiracy and tabloid theories about the world, that the world is flat, and then professional media in Bulgaria makes debates: is the world flat or not? So the same with vaccination, and it's very dangerous to walk on in this mud.
Yeah, exactly. And although our index does not measure the quality of media, we do have some recommendations how to improve it, how to increase trustworthiness of information, and eventually trust in the media, which I think is absolutely necessary for journalists to be able to exercise their rights and their job. And for example, we have something that is called Journalism Trust Initiative. It's a benchmark which we developed for measuring the trustworthiness of information in the media. And we propose to media to self-evaluate themselves through this instrument, and also an access to external certification, assessment. And this instrument, Journalism Trust Initiative, has European certification. It's not something that we just wrote down at RSF and now we're promoting it. We developed it with European Broadcasting Union, World Press Agencies, and we had it certified with the European institutions. So, and this, I think this is a response to sort of measuring or improving the trustworthiness of information. And I totally agree with you about the COVID issue. I think there is a link between Bulgaria having the lowest rate of vaccination in the EU, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the lowest ones, and one of the highest death rates
and
per capita.
The media state.
And the link between this and disinformation spread by certain websites. I'm almost reluctant to call them media. So
not only Pavol. No, official mainstream big television channels make debates pro and con against or pro vaccines. They invite all the time anti-vaxxers. It is a national politics, I think now. It's a very dangerous thing.
Yes, I think we have to have something to motivate media to sort of promote trustworthy information.
And not only to look for the scandal. Media is a big tool. And when the media belongs to politicians or to certain circles, they can really erase brains and manipulate the whole society. And we're in this big political crisis because of the media.
Yes, but these media which spread fake news, they have some advertisement. They have some funding from the state or from the European funds. They have some obligations which sometimes they don't respect. And I think we have in Bulgaria some of the rules, the important rules in place about transparency of ownership, about declaring revenues from the state. And these rules, unfortunately, have not been applied. That is the problem. So I will be asking the authorities in Bulgaria to apply these rules and sanction outlets which don't respect them. You mentioned influence of politicians. This is a big problem in Bulgaria: transparency of ownership, corruption in the media, conflict of interest. But we just need the political will to apply these rules, and then these media will have to change the way they inform. And I know the key problem here is the political will, but I think that if politicians in Bulgaria are not interested in press freedom, they should be interested in the trustworthiness of information, because it's a problem also for political parties that the vaccination rate is so low. It's their result, and eventually they will have a hard job managing this situation.
The huge crisis.
This is first. And the second is fight against corruption at a time when also Bulgaria will receive a lot of money from the EU for the recovery plan, post-COVID. So, and of course, this is money of the European taxpayers, and it is very important that media can control how this money is spent and that the fight against corruption is ongoing. So, and we cannot be sure that we have this information without trustworthy media. So this is why I believe that access to trustworthy information is a political priority number one for Bulgaria. And when you don't have access to trustworthy information, you don't have fight against corruption or fight against coronavirus crisis.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then come the question about the independent alternative media. Of course, there are professionals who continue to try to actually do their job the way it should be done and follow the journalistic standards. And there are professional media in Bulgaria which are not that popular, well-funded, rich and spread. But they exist, but they do have big problems because independent media not only has to survive, in order to be professional, has to have funding. It's not enough to have a phone and make a package from the place of the crime. You know that very well. You need funding. So they struggle a lot to find funders, to find donors, to find people who would invest in them. And like right now it happened, there was this TV show called Alternativata, which was a real alternative to the mainstream status quo media show, where erased from the map journalists who were doing very important interviews, stopped being able to be aired on a very small cable channel because one guy bought it. So you can always erase them. You know about Capital and Dnevnik and their owners. You know how the whole machine tries to suppress, to threaten, and to actually stop them from working. Also, even if you're a smaller media, you don't get coverage, because if 7,000 people watch your show online, this doesn't make one deputy place in the next parliament. So what should be done, you think, in order to strengthen the independent and the alternative professional media? Because there are a lot of alternative media, but some of them are tabloid. We call them brown here in Bulgaria. They can ruin your reputation for a second.
Yes. And they did attack Reporters Without Borders.
I'm sure they
in the past. But we cannot just by ourselves bring a remedy to this situation. We are an international non-governmental organization. We can denounce violations, we can make recommendations, we can go on the ground, which I'm doing in Sofia, but eventually the decision has to be taken by politicians who are elected by the people. So really, I still believe that Bulgaria is a democracy, and people decide what politicians will do. Regarding the specific solutions that we propose, I think journalism today in Bulgaria is in a crisis. It needs an exit from the crisis, a plan for an exit strategy. And what we are proposing is to support these professional independent media in various ways. One of the ways, I already mentioned it, is how these rules about advertisement and state funding are enforced. They need to be enforced, equally, so that they don't put in disadvantage independent media. Public advertisement has to be distributed transparently, equally, as well, and not to the profit of pro-government media. And then we can talk about attacks. So investigative journalists who work in these independent media are exposed to physical attacks, to judicial harassment, to arbitrary prosecution. And we need new legislation also to protect journalists against slaps, against abusive lawsuits.
New legislation to actually, and also choose the governing directors, boards of public media.
Yes.
Which are publicly funding by the people in the country, right? Because making this point because after your statement about Bulgarian national television, public television, and the way they covered the elections, you said they were biased. Unbiased Council of Electronic Media said you're lying. So why?
Yes, I mean it's not only Reporters Without Borders who are saying they are biased. No. It's also OEC, Council of Europe. These are relevant international reports, and yes, this is another point that we have proposed in our recommendation published in April this year, before the first election, and that is to reform the way how managers of public media are selected. This process needs to be more inclusive, include
experts,
involve more experts, civil society, and other parts of the society than just politicians or the regulator. Then, of course, these media, the public media, need to have editorial and financial independence. It's impossible that the national television's budget is decided from one year to another and depends on the will of the government in place and eventually its relations with the Director General. So these reforms need to be made, and they need to be made for Bulgarians to have access to trustworthy information about corruption, about coronavirus crisis, and not only for Bulgarians, because corruption in EU funds or coronavirus crisis are phenomena which go beyond Bulgarian borders. They are, and journalists who in Bulgaria who inform about them produce information which is important for all Europeans, because Absolutely. Bulgaria is in the EU. Bulgarians travel and spending EU taxpayers' money. So, improving access to trustworthy information in Bulgaria is in the European public interest. But your country, I believe, has a long and strong intellectual history and tradition. And, the Bulgarian writer, Georgi Gospodinov, he wrote, "Where there is darkness, a miracle always lies sleeping." So I think we have to believe in a miracle, and we have to try to make it happen. So I haven't lost hope. I think Bulgarian journalists are very courageous. They are very cooperative among themselves. They are defending together their interests, and Reporters Without Borders are with them, and we are supporting them.
I hope our viewers got to your point, and I'm very thankful to your organization that you actually do help us in our efforts to strengthen the freedom of speech and media in Bulgaria, and to actually fight for better, professional and truthful media here. Thank you very much, Pavol. This is the head of Reporters Without Borders for European Union and the Balkans, especially for the Fulbright Conference about representation in today's democracy. Thank you, Pavol. And
thank you, Iskra. Maybe just a last word for the end, as this is for a Fulbright Conference. So I myself studied in the US at Bard College, and there were a lot of Bulgarians there. And these people were extremely smart, and they were really sticking together. It was actually hard to sit with them at one table in the canteen, because they were all the time together speaking Bulgarian. And these successful people, most of them stayed in the US, of those whom I knew. And I think this is a pity, and I know that yourself have a very important professional experience from the US.
Yes, you came back. Yes, in New York, which was
you came back. Yes. So I also studied
the Fulbright.
Yes, and I also studied in the state of New York and in the city of New York at Bard. And I think it's really important that you came back and you are struggling. it's very honorable, and I think this is a way to go, and it's really important that we do everything that people with this excellent experience and knowledge come back to Bulgaria and continue fighting. So thank you for that.
One thing that they do teach you in the United States of America, where I got my master's in broadcast journalism and worked for CBS in New York, as you said, thank you, is that they teach you how to be free and how to defend freedom. This is you're raised with this in your it becomes part of you, and it's in your veins. So this is what's mutual between us. I wanted to ask you 3 short questions about your favorite author and books, about your favorite music composer, pop group, and about your favorite destination where you travel when you have free time, although your work is connected to travel. So we can somehow get an impression who you are, aside from your excellency in your professional field and career.
I like a lot the Slovak author Milan Šimečka. He was a dissident during communism.
Somehow like our Georgi Markov?
Yes, maybe. Okay. And but I also have a favorite French author, Jean-Christophe Ruffin, who writes novels and is quite popular in France. And I had the chance to meet him while he was visiting Slovakia. It was great to meet your favorite writer, who you never hoped to meet. My favorite music. Well, I like jazz, in all its kinds. And your last question was about
the places you want to go when you're not working.
The places I want to go when I'm not working. I like hiking in the mountains. This summer I went to the Pyrenees on the Spanish border. It was great. I think it's the mountains make you feel that all the problems you may have, actually there are so many other bigger things than your problems.
Yeah,
so it was really relaxing.
Thank you very much for sharing this. As Don Quixote, it's a quote from Don Quixote that says, the freedom is on the top of the sword, so we should use it every day. We should fight for it every day. There is a Bulgarian author, Radoj Ralin, who is also a dissident, and also a poet. And he used to say that you have to, the freedom is like the bread. You have to make it every day. So we continue making it and fighting for it and believing in it every day, and you give us hope that it's possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iskra.
Pavol Szalai from Reporters Without Borders.